"Get that thing off my street!" Victoria Monroe screamed at me across my frost-covered driveway, her voice cutting through the December cold like a blade. Behind her, a tow truck driver was hooking chains to my restored Camaro. Metal scraping against frozen concrete, I dropped my grocery bags in the snow, fury flooding my veins. "That's my car on my property," I shouted back. Military training, the only thing keeping my fists at my sides as I stormed toward her through the frost. "You have no authority to touch it!" "I have every authority!" She jabbed her clipboard toward my chest, breath fogging between us in the winter air. "This eyesore violates HOA Regulation 7.3. I sent you 6 warnings. Warnings about a legally parked vehicle on my own driveway? Your property ends at the sidewalk." Victoria's face flushed red despite the December cold. She bent down, grabbed my Bronze Star license plate frame from where the tow driver had removed it, and kicked it across the frozen concrete. It skidded through the snow and slammed into my garbage bin with a metallic clang that echoed through the neighborhood. 22 years of service. Reduced to trash in the December frost. Military people always think they're so special. She sneered. That crimson blazer bright against the gray winter sky. "But this is my neighborhood now, and you'll follow my rules or get out!" The tow truck engine roared. My Camaro, 3 years of restoration work with my late father, lifted off the ground. Wheels spinning uselessly in the cold air. Neighbors watched from frost-covered windows. Some recording, none intervening. I stepped closer to Victoria through the December cold until we were face to face. Breath steaming between us. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," I said quietly. Voice deadly calm. She laughed high. "Cruel," echoing in the frozen air. "Is that a threat? I'll call the police right now and have you arrested for intimidation." "No threat," I said, watching my Camaro disappear down the frost-covered street. "Just a fact. Because what's sitting in my garage weighs 25 tons? And when it shows up on this street, your little clipboard won't mean a damn thing." Her smile faltered for just a second through the December cold. But it was too late. The war had started. But let me back up 3 hours before the frost settled. I'd been at the grocery store when my phone exploded with texts from neighbors. Cold air seeping through automatic doors as I loaded bags. "Something happening at your house. Tow truck in your driveway." Victoria's out there with her clipboard again. By the time I raced home through Riverside Meadows, speeding through every yellow light, December wind cutting through my jacket, it was too late. The absence hit me like incoming fire through the winter cold. Where my 1969 Camaro SS should have been sitting, the car I'd spent 3 years restoring with parts my father had collected before his heart attack, there was nothing but fresh gouges in the asphalt and black tire, marks where the tow truck had scraped her backward across the frozen concrete. I sat in my pickup for a full minute. Groceries forgotten? Breath fogging the windshield as I stared at that violated space. The neighborhood felt wrong through the December cold. Mrs. Sullivan's kids usually played kickball until dinner. But today, the cul-de-sac sat empty, except for the vultures watching from behind frost-covered windows. The silence stretched like a held breath before a mortar impact. That's when I heard Tom Hayes whisper to his wife on their front porch, their breath steaming in the winter air. He used to drive tanks or something over in Afghanistan. His voice carried just enough for me to catch a reminder that some neighbors actually remembered what I'd done before Iron Horse Logistics became my civilian life. Victoria Monroe emerged from her house like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. and I saw her fully for the first time in the December light. At 52, Victoria had transformed our quiet neighborhood into her personal kingdom through 3 years of tyrannical rule. She was striking in a way that didn't belong in a frozen suburban cul-de-sac mid-50s. Composed. Expensively dressed, despite the cold. She wore a crimson-red blazer that fit like it had been tailored specifically for her frame. Draped open just enough to reveal a black silk top beneath the V-neck, cut deep and deliberate. Almost defiant against the December chill. A matching red pencil skirt with a subtle slit, paired with glossy red heels that clicked sharply against the frost-covered walkway. Her wine-brown hair fell in perfect waves just past her shoulders, and her lips glossy red. Precise, curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but a warning. She looked like someone who'd built an empire on suburban compliance and had no intention of surrendering it to winter or reason. Real estate had tanked her husband Robert's business 2 years ago, leaving them scrambling financially through cold seasons. But she'd found new power in micromanaging everyone else's property values. That clipboard never left her side through rain or frost, a portable throne from which she issued daily judgments about grass height, mailbox angles, and who deserved to live here. I warned you about that eyesore. She called across the street through the December air, voice dripping with satisfaction, breath fogging between us. This is a respectable neighborhood. Michael, we maintain standards. I climbed out slowly into the cold. Military training, keeping my expression neutral even as fury built in my chest. Where's my car? Victoria? She consulted her clipboard with theatrical precision. That crimson blazer catching the pale winter light. Towed at 1,400 hours for violation of HOA regulation 7.3. Her smile could have cut frozen glass. 6 documented warnings. All completely legal. My Bronze Star license plate frame lay in my garbage bin beside the curb. Coffee grounds stuck to metal that had survived Taliban mortars. Frost already forming on the brass. 22 years of service reduced to trash in the December cold. Something cold and dangerous settled behind my ribs, colder than the winter wind. That car was legally parked on my own property. Your property ends at the sidewalk. Victoria stepped closer through the frost, sensing weakness she could exploit. That crimson blazer bright against the gray December sky. That vehicle was destroying our community aesthetic. Just like that inappropriate flag display and those oversized military decorations. She gestured at my house with disgust. Breath steaming. Constant reminders that you think service makes you special. The neighborhood went completely silent through the winter air. Even the birds had fled south, leaving only cold wind. Victoria pressed her advantage, voice dropping to make this personal through the December chill. Military people always think rules don't apply to them. But this isn't some foreign battlefield where you can do whatever you want. This is my neighborhood, and you'll follow my rules. In Iraq, I'd learned to read enemy positions before engaging. Victoria had just revealed everything. Her contempt, her power, and most importantly, her complete ignorance about who she was dealing with. I glanced toward my closed garage where something weighing 25 tons waited in climate-controlled storage, protected from winter's bite. Victoria followed my gaze through the cold air but saw only another potential violation. She had no idea what really lived behind that steel door, or why a former tank battalion commander might keep certain pieces of military history for special occasions even in December. I've been tracking your violations for months, she continued. emboldened by my silence. That crimson blazer seeming to glow with false authority in the winter light. Grass height, garbage bin positioning, flag size regulations. Daily fines start tomorrow, $200 until you achieve full compliance. She turned to leave, heels clicking on frost. Then delivered her final insult. Next time you want to play soldier, do it somewhere that appreciates military theatrics. Real Americans don't need to advertise their service. The words hung in the December air like smoke from an explosion. Real Americans. I'd pulled wounded soldiers from burning vehicles while mortars fell around us. Earned my Bronze Star leading men through hell. And this woman questioned my patriotism over an HOA violation in the December cold. Victoria strutted back to her house through the frost. Clipboard tucked under her arm like a trophy. That crimson blazer disappearing into the warmth. Tom Hayes caught my eye through the winter air and gave a small nod before disappearing inside acknowledgement from someone who understood what those 22 years actually meant. I retrieved my Bronze Star frame from the frozen garbage, brushing off debris and frost. The metal felt solid and familiar, even in the December cold, a reminder of battles won through patience, planning, and overwhelming force applied at exactly the right moment. The Camaro had been about the past memories of working with my father, restoring something beautiful together during long summers. But what waited in my garage represented something different entirely. 25 tons of American steel that no HOA regulation had ever contemplated, fully legal and registered as historical military vehicle, protected from winter weather in climate-controlled storage. Victoria Monroe thought she'd won today's battle by having my car towed through the December frost. What she'd actually done was declare war on someone who understood strategy, patience, and the devastating effectiveness of superior firepower deployed at the perfect moment, even in winter. She didn't know it yet, but she'd just picked a fight with someone who'd won much bigger battles than this through cold and heat alike. The war began at 0637 the next morning through December darkness. I was drinking coffee on my front porch, watching the sunrise paint riverside meadows in shades of gold through frost, breath steaming in the cold air, when my phone buzzed with the first casualty report. A screenshot from our neighborhood social media group, posted by Victoria at 0615 sharp. Problem resident continues refusing HOA compliance despite multiple warnings. This affects all our property values. Community action may be necessary. The post already had 12 reactions, mostly angry faces and concerned comments from people who'd probably never exchanged more than a wave with me through winter mornings. Victoria had turned my car situation into a neighborhood crisis overnight, painting herself as the defender of property values against my alleged rebellion. I screenshot everything through the December cold. 22 years in the military had taught me the value of documentation, and Victoria was about to learn that lesson the hard way, even in winter, by 0800 hours. She'd escalated beyond social media warfare through the frost. I found the first citation taped to my mailbox, ice crystals forming on the paper. Violation notice. Grass height exceeds community standard by 1 1/4 inches. Daily fine. $200 until corrected. I measured my frozen lawn with a ruler through the December cold. 2.3 inches exactly. Well within the HOA bylaws that specified grass maintained between 2 and 4 inches in height. Victoria was making up violations in the winter. The second citation appeared on my garbage bins. Frost clinging to the tape. Improper waste container positioning. Bins must be placed exactly 18 inches from curb, parallel to street. I measured again through numb fingers in the December air. 17 3/4 inches. Perfectly parallel. Another fabricated violation with photographic evidence proving my compliance. 5 more citations appeared throughout that cold day. Mailbox angle. Doormat placement. Garden hose positioning. Even the direction my outdoor chairs faced in the frost. Victoria was manufacturing violations faster than I could document them through the December chill, each carrying the same $200 daily fine threat. Her desperation had created a systematic harassment campaign that would have been impressive if it weren't so obviously illegal. Even in winter. The community response split exactly as expected through the cold. Tom Hayes nodded supportively when he saw me photographing citations in the frost, while newer families like the Johnsons avoided eye contact entirely through their warm windows. Mrs. Sullivan brought me homemade cookies with a quiet "stay strong" that told me where veteran families stood despite the December cold. But the young professionals worried about property values, and Victoria's social media campaign was working on their winter fears. Time to research my enemy through the December darkness. The Riverside Meadows HOA bylaws made fascinating reading when you understood military intelligence gathering, even by firelight on cold nights. Section 12 clearly outlined enforcement procedures, written warnings with specific violation descriptions, mandatory 30-day response periods, board review before any financial penalties. Victoria had violated every procedural requirement when she had my car towed through the December frost, creating a paper trail of misconduct that invalidated her entire authority. But the real intelligence goldmine came from public records that survived even winter storage. County clerk files showed that Victoria's husband, Robert, had lost his real estate license 18 months ago after multiple client complaints about misrepresented property conditions and undisclosed defects. Their house carried a second mortgage taken out 8 months ago for $67,000. Financial pressure that explained Victoria's desperate obsession with property values and her need to demonstrate control even through winter hardship. Most damaging of all, HOA meeting minutes archived on our community website revealed that 3 months ago, back in September, before the cold, Victoria had unilaterally approved a $5,000 landscaping contract for her brother-in-law's company without competitive bidding or board approval, directly violating the same financial oversight requirements she now claimed to enforce so religiously against residents through the December frost. Victoria Monroe was running a corrupt, procedurally violative HOA operation while fabricating violations against residents who challenged her authority. In military terms, she was operating outside her own rules of engagement while demanding strict adherence from everyone else through summer heat and winter cold alike. That afternoon, as December wind cut through the neighborhood, she made her next tactical error. I was checking my mail through the frost when Victoria approached from across the street, clipboard in hand and fire in her eyes despite the cold. The confrontation felt inevitable through the December air, like enemy contact you could sense coming long before visual confirmation. "You think being a veteran makes you untouchable?" she snapped, positioning herself between me and my front door like she owned the frozen sidewalk. That crimson blazer bright against the winter gray. I've dealt with your type before. Military people who think they can ignore civilian authority. The entire community was watching now through frost-covered windows. Tom Hayes stood on his lawn pretending to water frozen plants while obviously listening, breath steaming. Mrs. Sullivan had emerged to collect mail she'd already retrieved that morning, bundled against the cold. The Johnson family peered through their living room curtains, heat blurring the glass. Victoria's decision to make this confrontation public through the December cold had just raised the stakes from private harassment to neighborhood spectacle, and she was too angry to realize the tactical disadvantage. Even as her breath fogged in the winter air, "What type is that?" "Victoria?" I asked quietly, keeping my voice level and reasonable for the audience despite the cold. "Entitled. Arrogant. Acting like rules don't apply because you wore a uniform." She stepped closer through the frost, trying to use physical intimidation in full view of witnesses. That crimson blazer trembling slightly in the December wind. "This is civilian territory. Michael, your military rank means absolutely nothing here. I make the rules, and you're going to follow them or face the consequences." The irony was perfect through the winter air. Victoria was lecturing me about following rules while violating every procedural requirement in her own HOA bylaws. But her public display had just fundamentally shifted the entire dynamic. This was no longer about citations or car towing or even harassment through December cold. This was about who controlled Riverside Meadows. And she'd just declared total war in front of half the neighborhood. Breath fogging with each angry word. "I'm familiar with following rules," I said calmly despite the chill. "The question is whether you are..." Her face flushed deep red despite the December cold, that crimson blazer seeming to pulse with fury. "I am the rules in this neighborhood. Every citation, every fine, every enforcement decision goes through me. And you're going to learn that the hard way, starting tomorrow when your fines double for non-compliance." She turned and stomped back to her house through the frost, heels clicking on ice, leaving me with absolute clarity about my next strategic move despite the winter air. Victoria had just escalated beyond harassment into something that resembled a hostile takeover attempt, complete with threats of financial punishment for resistance, all in the December cold. That evening, as darkness fell early and frost thickened, I compiled my counteroffensive research by lamplight. Federal housing protections existed for veterans facing discrimination based on military status, and Victoria's public comments about my service created a clear, documented pattern of bias recorded in the December cold. Her procedural violations during my car towing provided grounds for challenging her authority through proper channels. Her financial misconduct gave the HOA board legal cause to remove her from office entirely. But defensive measures wouldn't end this war. Even in winter, I needed superior firepower. Legally speaking, my research into military vehicle regulations had revealed something Victoria's narrow civilian worldview couldn't possibly anticipate. Even through summer warmth or winter cold, the Department of Defense surplus program allowed qualified veterans to purchase decommissioned military vehicles for historical preservation purposes with proper federal licensing, insurance, and registration. These vehicles became legal civilian property subject to federal rather than local regulations, protected even through harsh December weather. My garage currently housed exactly such a vehicle. Safe from winter's bite, a 1960 M60 Patton tank, fully decommissioned and registered as historical military equipment, 25 tons of American steel that I'd acquired 3 years ago for veteran memorial events and educational demonstrations stored in climate-controlled space during winter months. Victoria's HOA bylaws meticulously regulated passenger vehicles, trucks, motorcycles, and recreational vehicles through all seasons. They said absolutely nothing about historical military equipment because suburban developers never imagined needing such provisions, not even for winter storage. I had found the perfect legal weapon to end Victoria's tyrannical reign while staying completely within federal law. If she wanted to play by rules through the December cold, I was about to teach her what real rules looked like. The real war began in my home office at 0500 hours the next morning. While December darkness still held the frozen neighborhood, while Victoria slept off her belief that she'd won last night's confrontation, I was already building the intelligence file that would end her reign of suburban tyranny even through winter cold. Federal military surplus regulations proved fascinating reading by desk lamp in the December darkness. Qualified veterans could purchase decommissioned equipment for historical preservation and memorial activities, with federal law superseding local ordinances for such vehicles protected through all weather conditions. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake Harris, my former platoon sergeant who now ran a military surplus dealership in Nevada. Warm desert miles away from December frost. Michael, that M60 you've been storing is ready for transport whenever you need it. All federal permits current. Insurance paid through next year. Just say when. The M60 patent tank, sitting in climate-controlled storage 300 miles away, wasn't just a vehicle protected from winter weather. It was a memorial. I'd purchased it 3 years ago, after attending too many funerals for brothers who didn't make it home through summer heat and winter cold. The tank bore the same designation as the one I'd commanded in Iraq, where Sergeant Danny Sullivan, Mrs. Sullivan's nephew, had died pulling wounded soldiers from a burning Bradley under desert sun. 25 tons of American steel that represented every fallen comrade Victoria Monroe had just insulted when she questioned my patriotism through the December frost. By 0700. As winter dawn broke cold and gray, Victoria launched her counterattack. The noise complaint arrived via certified mail through the frozen morning. Excessive commercial vehicle activity, disturbing residential peace. Iron Horse Logistics operates illegally from residential address. Complete fabrication. I ran a consulting business from my home office with zero vehicle traffic. But Victoria had found neighbors willing to sign affidavits supporting her claims, probably terrified of her retaliation through the winter cold. The Johnsons had signed, huddled in their warm house. So had the new couple on Maple Street, who knew nothing about the actual situation but feared Victoria's December wrath. Fear was Victoria's most effective weapon through the cold, the threat of harassment that made good people choose compliance over justice. Her next move revealed true desperation as frost covered the morning windows. Legal notice. Property lien filing for accumulated HOA violations totaling $4,600. Payment required within 30 days or foreclosure proceedings will commence. She was threatening to steal my house over fabricated citations using intimidation tactics that had no legal foundation but might scare someone who didn't understand the system, especially in the vulnerability of winter hardship. That's when I decided to go nuclear. Even as December wind rattled the windows. The HOA board meeting was scheduled for 1900 hours in the community center, a monthly gathering that usually attracted 5 residents through winter darkness and lasted 20 minutes. Tonight would be different through the December cold. I spent the afternoon preparing a presentation that would expose Victoria's misconduct in front of witnesses and create an official record of her violations, documentation that would survive even winter storms. The community center buzzed with unusual energy when I arrived through the frost at 1845. Word had spread about the conflict through December whispers, and nearly 30 residents filled chairs that usually sat empty. Bundled in coats against the cold even indoors. Victoria presided from the head table like a queen holding court despite the winter chill. Clipboard, positioned for maximum authority display. That crimson blazer catching the harsh fluorescent light, first order of business. She announced with theatrical formality, breath visible in the poorly heated room. Addressing the ongoing compliance issues with property at 1522 Riverside Drive. Actually, I interrupted. Standing with a manila folder thick with evidence, I'd like to present information about procedural violations that invalidate those compliance actions. The room went silent through the December cold. Victoria's face flushed red, despite the chill. But she couldn't refuse without looking tyrannical in front of the entire frozen community. I quickly summarized the HOA bylaw violations. No warnings issued. No response periods provided. No board approval for enforcement actions. Then I moved to the real ammunition that would cut through winter defenses. There's also unauthorized financial decisions requiring investigation. I distributed meeting minutes from 3 months ago, back when autumn warmth still lingered, showing a $5,000 landscaping contract approved without competitive bidding or board vote. Paid to a company owned by Victoria's brother-in-law. Board member Patricia Bennett studied the documents with growing alarm. Breath fogging as she read in the cold room. Victoria. This shows you signed this contract unilaterally. It was an emergency repair. Victoria stammered. That crimson blazer, no longer looking so commanding in the harsh winter light. For decorative landscaping? I asked. The invoices show ornamental plants and aesthetic improvements. Not emergency repairs. The board looked stunned through the December cold. Victoria's financial misconduct was documented in their own meeting minutes, and they were just now realizing the implications despite the winter chill. Residents whispered in shocked tones as they processed the revelation that their HOA president had been operating outside her authority for months through summer, autumn, and into winter. That's when I delivered the killing blow that would freeze her authority completely. The landscaping fund shows a $3,000 discrepancy. I announced. Consulting financial records I'd requested under HOA transparency rules. $5,000 approved. $8,000 actually paid. The additional $3,000 came from general reserves without board authorization. Victoria's face went white despite the December cold. That crimson blazer suddenly seeming cheap under the fluorescent lights. The room erupted in concerned voices as residents realized their HOA president had potentially embezzled community funds to cover unauthorized expenses, money meant for winter maintenance and snow removal. Patricia Bennett frantically shuffled through her copies, confirming the numbers with visible distress. Breath coming faster in the cold air. This meeting is adjourned pending emergency financial audit and procedural review. She announced, voice shaking in the December chill, as residents filed out into the winter night, discussing Victoria's misconduct in shocked tones, breath steaming in the frozen parking lot. I felt the first taste of real victory despite the cold. Victoria's authority was crumbling in real time through the December darkness. Her financial crimes exposed before the entire community. That crimson blazer no longer commanding but pathetic in the winter night. But this was just the opening battle through the frost. Victoria cornered me in the frozen parking lot afterward, her composure finally cracking completely in the December cold. That crimson blazer trembling in the winter wind. You think you're so smart with your little investigation? Her breath fogged desperately between us. I know about your military contracts, your government connections. One phone call to the right people and your precious company disappears. Is that a threat? Victoria? It's a promise. Her voice cracked in the cold. You have no idea what you're dealing with. I've destroyed bigger men than you. But she was wrong through the December night. I knew exactly what I was dealing with. A desperate woman who'd overplayed her hand and was about to face consequences she couldn't imagine, not even through winter's harshest cold. Her threats were empty bluster from someone watching her kingdom collapse in the December frost. Walking back to my house under the frozen streetlights, breath steaming in the winter air, I pulled out my phone and texted Jake Harris. Time to bring thunder home. Schedule transport for this weekend. Victoria Monroe thought she'd seen my best cards tonight through the December cold. The procedural violations, the financial misconduct, the community exposure. She thought those were my only weapons in this war. She had no idea what was coming through the winter weather. Time to show her my ace, even if it meant rolling 25 tons of American steel through December frost. The drive to Nevada took 6 hours through winter landscapes, but I needed to see thunder with my own eyes before bringing her home through the cold. Jake Harris's surplus facility sat on 40 acres of desert outside Las Vegas, a world away from December frost. Baking under relentless sun, even in winter. Rows of decommissioned military vehicles stood like monuments. Humvees. Personnel, carriers, artillery pieces, even a few Cold War-era tanks. The graveyard of American military might. All waiting for new purposes in civilian hands under the Nevada sun. Thunder waited in the climate-controlled warehouse. Exactly as I'd left her 3 years ago. Protected from summer heat and winter cold. 25 tons of M60 Patton tank. Olive drab paint, still pristine. Treads that had never touched foreign soil but carried the same spirit as the ones that had. I ran my hand along the armor plating in the warm warehouse, remembering the weight of command. The responsibility of bringing soldiers home alive through heat and cold. This wasn't just a vehicle protected from weather. It was a memorial to Sergeant Mike Thunder Sullivan, who died saving 3 wounded soldiers from an IED blast outside Kandahar under desert sun. And to every brother who hadn't made it back through summer missions or winter deployments. Victoria Monroe had no right to dishonor that sacrifice with her petty suburban tyranny, not even through December cold. She's been waiting for you, Jake said quietly in the warm warehouse. Understanding the moment's significance, all maintenance current. Federal registration updated. Insurance policy covers transport and storage. The paperwork should hold up. But you know HOAs can get creative with their interpretations. I climbed into the commander's position in the warm interior, feeling the familiar weight of memories and responsibility. Any potential legal challenges? Hard to say. Most HOAs have never dealt with military equipment. The federal registration gives you solid ground, but local ordinances can create complications. Could go either way if they really push it. What about transport logistics through winter weather? Special permit required. But that's standard. Heavy haul truck can handle the weight, even in December. Route's been cleared with state DOT. Biggest risk is if your HOA tries some kind of emergency injunction while she's in transit through the cold. I spent another hour reviewing Thunder's documentation in the warm warehouse, ensuring every permit was current, every certification valid for winter transport. The federal historical vehicle registration was solid even for December delivery. But Jake's warnings about HOA creativity stuck with me through the desert warmth. Victoria had already proven adept at finding new ways to attack. Would winter weather slow her down or make her more desperate? While I was in Nevada securing my strategic advantage under desert sun, Victoria was launching her most desperate offensive yet through December frost back home. The restraining order arrived via process server the moment I returned through the winter cold. Emergency petition for protection. Respondent has threatened petitioner with military weapons and equipment, creating imminent danger to community safety. Complete fabrication, but potentially dangerous if a judge believed her victim narrative through the December chill. The court hearing was scheduled for the next morning through the frozen dawn. Victoria's attempt to use the legal system for harassment through winter desperation, but also a genuine threat that could derail everything I'd planned. My lawyer, David Martinez, met me at the courthouse the next morning with cautious optimism tempered by realism, breath steaming in the December parking lot. The good news is her claims are obviously false. The bad news is restraining orders have a low evidence threshold. Judges err on the side of caution, especially when military equipment gets mentioned in winter. What's our strategy? Document her harassment pattern. Show this as retaliation for exposing her misconduct. But Michael, if she convinces the judge you're genuinely dangerous, this could backfire completely. She could get an order preventing you from bringing any military equipment near the neighborhood, not even through December. The stakes were higher than I'd realized through the winter cold. Victoria wasn't just trying to harass me through the frost. She was attempting to neutralize my most powerful legal weapon before I could deploy it even in December. Judge Patricia Morrison presided over the hearing with stern professionalism that reminded me of military tribunals. Breath visible in the cold courtroom. Victoria sat across the room with her attorney, looking more confident than she had any right to be, despite the December chill. That crimson blazer bright under the harsh lights. Petitioner claims respondent threatened her with military weapons. Judge Morrison began, consulting the petition. Present your evidence. Victoria's attorney presented his case methodically through the winter morning. Your Honor, Mr. Carter explicitly stated he possessed military equipment that my client couldn't touch. Given his background and recent hostile behavior toward my client, she reasonably fears for her safety and that of the community. The exact words were what? Judge Morrison asked. Beverly leaned forward, playing her victim role perfectly despite the warmth indoors. That crimson blazer catching the light. He said he had something I couldn't touch legally. I then mentioned 25 tons. Given the context of our dispute and his military background, it felt like a clear threat of violence. Judge Morrison made notes. Expression unreadable in the cold courtroom. Mr. Carter, did you make statements about military equipment? The question felt like stepping into a minefield. I mentioned having legal property she couldn't interfere with. Your Honor, no threats of violence were made or implied. But you do possess military equipment? I own a decommissioned tank, registered for historical purposes. Yes. The admission seemed to shift the room's energy despite the December cold outside. Victoria's attorney seized the opportunity. Your Honor, bringing military weaponry into a residential dispute represents dangerous escalation that endangers the entire community. David rose for my defense. Presenting our evidence of Victoria's systematic harassment through autumn and winter, Your Honor, this petition represents continued retaliation against my client for exposing documented financial misconduct. Mrs. Monroe has engaged in a pattern of abuse, including fabricated violations and threats of property liens. But Judge Morrison's attention kept returning to the tank issue through the cold morning. Mr. Carter, explain the purpose of owning military equipment in a residential neighborhood. It's used for veteran memorial events and educational demonstrations. Your Honor, fully legal under federal historical preservation programs. The financial misconduct allegations are separate matters. Judge Morrison stated firmly, "My immediate concern is preventing this dispute from escalating into something dangerous for the community." After 30 minutes of arguments and cross-examination in the cold courtroom, the judge reached her decision. Petition for restraining order is dismissed due to insufficient evidence of immediate threat. However, given the volatile nature of this dispute and the presence of military equipment, I'm issuing a mutual stay-away order. Both parties will avoid all contact except through legal channels. Not the complete victory I'd hoped for through the December cold. Victoria actually looked satisfied with the mutual restriction. Despite the chill, it limited my ability to expose her misconduct publicly while giving her legal protection from direct confrontation. Walking out of the courthouse into December, wind. David was blunt about the implications. That could have gone much worse. But she's not finished. The mutual order actually helps her more than you. She can continue her HOA actions while claiming judicial protection. The community response after news of the hearing spread through the frozen neighborhood was notably mixed rather than supportive. Mrs. Sullivan posted careful support through social media. We should all respect our veterans. But legal matters should stay in court where they belong. Measured words through the winter air. Not the ringing endorsement I'd expected. Some neighbors began questioning Victoria's methods, but quietly and without commitment through the December cold. Ellie Johnson mentioned in passing that maybe there are two sides to this story, but wouldn't make public statements in the frost. The tank issue had introduced genuine uncertainty through the winter. People weren't sure what to think about military equipment entering their peaceful neighborhood, especially in December. Local veteran groups expressed interest but carefully avoided taking sides through the cold. The VFW post commander called to offer moral support while noting they couldn't officially take positions in ongoing legal disputes. That evening, as December darkness fell early and frost thickened, Jake Harris called with final transport confirmation, but his tone carried warnings through the winter connection. Michael, bringing thunder into an active legal dispute could complicate things significantly. You absolutely sure about this timing? It's legal property, properly registered under federal law. Legal and smart aren't always the same thing. Brother. That judge seemed concerned about escalation. I stood in my driveway that frozen night, knowing Victoria was probably watching from her warm window, planning her next move through the December darkness. Tomorrow would bring 25 tons of American steel to Riverside Meadows through the winter cold. And neither of us knew exactly how that confrontation would unfold in the frost. The HOA bylaws didn't mention historical military vehicles, which created a gray area rather than clear protection, especially in December. Victoria might not have direct authority over thunder, but she'd already proven remarkably creative at finding new angles of attack through summer warmth and winter cold. Victoria Monroe had lost today's legal skirmish through the December frost. But she wasn't defeated. The mutual stay-away order had actually given her breathing room to plan her next offensive through the winter chill. And I had no idea what weapons she might deploy in the cold. Tomorrow. Thunder comes home through the December weather. Whether there's anything she can do about it in the frost remains to be seen. 0600 hours. Transport day through December darkness. The call from Jake Harris woke me before my alarm. Winter cold seeping through the windows. Heavy haul trucks loaded and rolling. Thunder should arrive at your location by 0800. You ready for this in the cold? I stood at my bedroom window through the December darkness, watching Victoria's house across the frozen street. Her living room light had been on since 0500 through the winter morning. She knew something was coming through the cold. Ready as I'll ever be. Michael, once that tank hits your driveway through the December frost, there's no going back. You sure about this play? It's time. By 0630, I was coordinating with the transport crew at their staging area 5 miles outside Riverside Meadows, breath steaming as I talked. The heavy haul truck stretched 60 feet long through the winter dawn specialized trailer designed to carry industrial equipment weighing up to 40 tons. Even in December, Thunder sat secured on the flatbed like a sleeping giant under morning frost. 25 tons of American steel covered by military tarps that did nothing to hide her distinctive profile in the cold light. Federal permits? I asked the lead driver, a grizzled veteran named Sam Torres, who'd transported military equipment for 20 years through all weather, all current through winter. Sam said, breath fogging in the December air, DOT clearance, oversized load permits, insurance documentation. Sam handed me a thick folder through the cold. Route's been cleared with state police. Only potential issue is local interference, but there's no legal basis to stop us unless someone gets creative, even in December. I reviewed every document twice in the winter morning. Fingers numb. Federal Historical Vehicle Registration, insurance certificates, transport permits, maintenance records showing Thunder's weapon systems had been properly decommissioned. Everything documented through the cold. Everything Victoria Monroe would struggle to challenge even in winter. By 0715, as pale December sun broke through frost, Victoria had discovered the transport plans. Her Facebook post appeared like a call to arms through the winter morning. Emergency. Military weapons being transported into our community today. Children at risk. Call police. City Council. Anyone who can stop this invasion. Comments exploded within minutes through the December cold. Concerned parents. Confused neighbors. Veteran supporters trying to provide context, all typing frantically as winter morning brightened. Victoria was rallying every authority figure she could think of through the frost, painting this as a community emergency that required immediate intervention. She'd positioned supporters strategically around the frozen cul-de-sac. The Johnsons stood on their front lawn with phones ready, breath steaming in the December air. 2 other families had gathered near the street entrance through the cold, probably hoping to block access if necessary in the frost. Victoria appeared at her front window at 0730. Phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly. That crimson blazer visible even through frost-covered glass. I could see her mouth moving rapidly as she made her emergency calls through the winter morning. She's really going all out. Sam observed, watching the growing crowd through the December cold. You sure this is worth the drama and the frost? Before I could answer through the winter air, my phone rang. Thunder had evolved from controversial military equipment brought home in December, frost into the neighborhood's most distinctive landmark by March warmth. Local elementary schools began scheduling field trips to learn about military history and veteran sacrifice. Mrs. Patterson, a retired teacher, developed educational presentations about World War II, Korea, and modern conflicts, using Thunder as a tangible connection to abstract concepts of service and freedom. Children need to understand that freedom isn't free. She explained to groups of wide-eyed fourth graders as spring sunshine warmed Thunder's armor. Brave men and women like Mr. Carter served our country so you could live safely in neighborhoods like this. The kids loved climbing on Thunder's treads while I shared stories about military engineering, tank operations, and the importance of teamwork in dangerous situations. Their enthusiasm reminded me why I'd originally purchased Thunder to honor fallen comrades while educating future generations. Memorial Day brought the neighborhood's first official veteran ceremony, with Thunder serving as the centerpiece for honoring local military families. 43 veterans from 5 different conflicts gathered around the tank to share stories, display photos of lost friends, and explain to younger neighbors what military service really meant. Mrs. Sullivan's nephew, Danny, was honored with a memorial wreath placed on Thunder's front slope. His sacrifice in Iraq, like so many others, finally received the community recognition it deserved. The positive publicity generated unexpected benefits for Iron Horse Logistics. Local news coverage about the veteran who'd stood up to HOA harassment brought inquiries from companies seeking military-experienced project management. My business grew by 30%. Specializing in complex logistics challenges that required patience, planning, and decisive execution. You handled that neighborhood situation with real military precision, noted Greg Miller, a construction company owner who'd hired me after seeing the news coverage. We need that kind of strategic thinking for our projects. Veterans throughout the region began reaching out for advice about dealing with housing discrimination and HOA harassment. My experience with Victoria had become a case study in documenting abuse, understanding legal procedures, and maintaining dignity while fighting systematic oppression. The respect I'd earned from neighbors extended beyond the initial conflict. Tom Hayes and I had become genuine friends, bonding over military history and shared frustration with bureaucratic overreach. Even former Victoria supporters like the Johnsons had apologized and integrated into the community's healthier dynamic. Thunder hosted regular veteran gatherings where former soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen shared experiences with neighborhood families. These informal education sessions built bridges between civilian and military communities, fostering understanding that had never existed during Victoria's divisive reign. Victoria's story took a different trajectory entirely. She'd moved away quietly after settling the financial investigation for $4,000 in restitution plus administrative costs. The criminal charges for filing false reports were reduced to community service and probation after she completed anger management counseling. Her marriage to Robert had survived, but barely. Friends reported that Victoria had undergone significant personal reflection about her need to control others and her disrespect for military service. The public humiliation had forced genuine self-examination that years of unchallenged authority had prevented. She's working as a receptionist at a veterinary clinic now. Mrs. Sullivan mentioned during one of our conversations, apparently she's much happier in a position where she helps people instead of harassing them. Victoria's story had become a cautionary tale throughout the county's HOA community. Property management companies were revising their oversight procedures to prevent similar abuses of authority. Board member training now included sections about respecting residents' rights and following proper procedures. The broader impact extended beyond Riverside Meadows. Veteran advocacy groups had used our conflict to highlight housing discrimination issues affecting military families. State representatives were considering legislation to strengthen veteran housing protections and limit HOA authority over historical military displays. On quiet spring evenings, I often sat on my front porch watching neighborhood kids play street hockey while their parents chatted about school events. work challenges, and weekend plans. Normal suburban life had returned, but with deeper appreciation for the principles that made such peace possible. Thunder dominated my driveway like a gentle giant. Her olive drab paint, now weathered by seasons of sun and storms through winter, frost, and spring warmth. Children had grown comfortable climbing her treads during community events. Veterans used her commander's hatch for informal storytelling sessions. She'd become exactly what I'd hoped, a living memorial that honored sacrifice while educating about freedom's cost. The American flag I'd raised every morning still flew from the same pole Victoria had once criticized as inappropriate. Now it was joined by memorial flags for neighborhood families who'd lost loved ones in service, creating a tribute wall that reminded everyone what military families had sacrificed for community safety. 25 tons of American steel had taught our neighborhood something fundamental through December cold and March warmth. Respect isn't demanded through harassment and intimidation. It's earned through character, service, and principled stands for what's right. And once earned through genuine sacrifice, it must be defended against those who would diminish its value through all seasons. Thunder would remain in Riverside Meadows as long as I lived here, serving as both memorial and reminder that some principles are worth fighting for, and that sometimes the best battles are won not through force, but through patience, documentation, and unwavering commitment to doing what's right, whether in December, frost, or spring sunshine. 25 tons of American steel taught our neighborhood something important about respect and sacrifice. And it all started with one woman making the biggest mistake of her life on a cold December day, thinking she could dishonor military service and get away with it.